need to be uppercuts for Turk's strategy to work. So, Turk's strategy was to raise his guard and punch him in the gut, then intercept his first uppercut with a punch to the face before he ducks down. His second uppercut is then taken care of by raising Macho's guard to hit him in the gut again, then hitting him in the face before he ducks down. Punches 3, 4, and 5 are cancelled before you can throw them by hitting him in the gut. Then Macho stands still for his mini-spin pattern. Turk unleashed a barrage of max damage star punches and punches to the face and gut, all while moving his guard around by pressing and releasing the up button at strategic times. In order to get all the punches in needed to knock him down, Macho needs to stand still for as long as possible, which is only about a 1 in 4 chance. So, altogether, not counting attempts used for execution, there was just a 1 in 34 chance of getting out of the first phase of the fight. For phase 2, Macho once again needs to stand still long enough to sneak in enough punches and uppercuts, and 3 stars need to be in your inventory by the time Macho backs up. That bumps the odds up to just over 1 in 90. The execution on sneaking each punch in also needs to be tight enough for the clock to not roll over to 37 seconds before beginning the spin pattern. And to give you an idea of how hard that execution is, these are the inputs that need to be done to sneak in all of those hits. Macho's guard is in transition, so you begin the phase by pressing up and down to throw a face punch that must release up while the punch is being thrown so Macho doesn't raise his guard to block it. Then, the uppercut is done by pressing up and start but releasing up right after Macho brings his guard up so it does bonus damage. Then, the technique Turk invented called the Easy Destroyer is performed. You tap up, then immediately release it and throw a gut punch, then press up and B to throw a face punch but let go of up while the punch is going off so Macho lowers his guard and the punch can hit his face. Finally, one more gut punch is snuck in by tapping up to bring Macho's guard up, then pressing B to throw the gut. That's a lot of inputs, and it's all performed right here at the start of phase 2. Then, Macho backs up to go into a spin pattern. In Macho's spin pattern, he spins around between 3 and 8 times before stopping for you to land your star punch. The clock stays frozen this whole time, but in order to throw your star punch fast enough, you need to know when he stops instead of doing another dodge. The 2 ways to do this were, 1, to listen for the last spin punch, which is slightly higher pitched than all the rest. Or 2, stare at the clock, and then as soon as it starts moving again, throw the star punch. Phase 3 is a repeat of phase 2, except instead of needing the long delay before a spin pattern, you need the short delay, since Macho gets up with less health the second time and doesn't need to be hit as much. That pushes the odds to about 1 in 181 in getting the luck needed to beat Macho in 48 seconds like Turk did. Not to mention the precise, tight, and essentially flawless execution needed the whole way through. So we're looking at odds of about 0.5%, and execution harder than just about any fight in the game. Who would be crazy enough to try to top that? Well, Zallard won, of course.
And he gets up. And he's just like, no.
In the middle of the fight, Zallard began doing attempts to beat Turk. He was a veteran of the game at this point, so he saw results very quickly, getting times of 50 and 45 in July and August respectively. These fights both lost time in phase 2 because the clock ticked over to 37 before the spin. But hundreds of attempts later, that 48 was still unbeatable. Zallard realized that tying Turk's time would be hard enough, but actually getting under a decimal of 0.82 was going to be essentially impossible unless he added in something that Turk didn't do. So that's what he decided to do. He would assume that Macho would stop spinning on the third spin punch of phase 3, allowing him to throw the uppercut faster since he didn't have to wait for the audio or visual cue. This didn't guarantee his time under 0.82, but it at least gave him a better chance. Macho has just a 5 in 16 chance of stopping on the third spin punch, so the odds of the entire fight were now over 1 in 500. Zallard streamed some of his attempts to beat Turk's time, but most of the attempts just looked like this. This 48.82 is Zalor threw attempt after attempt at Macho, but it wasn't happening. He had to hit punch after punch, be precise in every location, and wait for 1 in 500 odds. It didn't look like it was happening. And then, Zalor got this attempt past phase 1.
Okay. Oh my god, it's 1 in 5 with a star. That's fucking crazy. Fuck. Okay. Because I got that 25, that saved it.
As he sat there looking for the time, he was praying it was fast enough to tie his hurt too. But he knew there was a slim chance he had gone even faster. All he could do now was wait for the fade out and see the blue screen. Turk's time wasn't high. It wasn't as fast. It was thoroughly beat. 1 in 500 off of 5, and Matt Turk now only had 2 unsaid records to his name. This 213 on life was, by a long shot, the hardest fight to pull off at all. On Don Flamenco 1, Turk hit a frame perfect punch. On Great Fight, Turk had to land 4 frame perfect punches. To get his 213 Tyson, Turk had to land 20 frame-perfect punches. Tyson's pattern is to throw uppercuts for the first minute and a half of the fight. You can hit him twice after each one. The first one deals 5 damage as long as it's from the same side of the screen that Tyson threw from, and the second one normally deals 1 damage no matter what. However, if you delay the second punch to the last frame before he would block it, it deals 5 damage instead of 1. That's a frame-perfect punch. You have a 60th of a second to time it. And for the first phase of the fight, literally all you're doing is landing frame-perfect punch after frame-perfect punch. Tyson begins the fight with 96 health. Since he could deal 10 damage on each punch Tyson throws, that means Tyson must throw 10 punches for you to be able to send him down the first time. And you need to be frame perfect on 9 of them to get an optimal first knockdown. Even if you hit the 9 frame perfect punches though, Tyson's pattern largely determines what time you get. He can randomly delay for an in-game second between certain punches, or potentially even do a long delay called the 8-second delay when in Turk's 2, he got a pattern from Tyson where he flat out didn't delay at all. A pattern that was only about 3.5% likely and led to a first knockdown pattern. For the second, he gets up with 56 health. That means 6 punches from Tyson need to be framed for 5 minutes. Tyson didn't do it. So what's important Turk got 1 delay from Tyson in phase 2, but thanks to his perfect phase 1, it led to a blazing fast 128 second knockdown. In phase 3, Tyson switches to throwing hooks. If you wait to the last 60th of a second before hitting him after he throws a hook, that single punch will deal 5 damage. If you're early, you'll have to punch him twice for 4 damage total, and if you're late, you'll get blocked and deal no damage. These frame-perfect punches are generally regarded as tougher to hit than the uppercut ones. Tyson gets up with 40 health for phase 3, so 8 frame-perfect punches would be a perfect phase 3. Turk hit 6 frame-perfect punches and got a bit of a slow pattern from Tyson, but it was enough to set a world record of 213. This 213 stood apart from his other records in a way. Its legacy reached far past his other 13 times, and for years it was just this impossibly fast time that top players couldn't even get close to. Not only did it land 20 frame-perfect punches, but the pattern he got from Tyson was ridiculous. He achieved this time in December 2007, with knockdown times of 54, 128, and 2 seconds. As of mid-2014, nobody else had ever gotten under 55 in the first knockdown and 129 for the second knockdown. Turk not only was able to get that 54 128, but then capitalized on this phase 3 and played off the perfect. Of course, other top players fought Tyson years later, but their best efforts came up short. In February 2011, Sinister once set his long-standing personal best at 2 minutes. He got a second knockdown of 132 to a slower Tyson, and then hit 4 frame-perfect hits in phase 3 to end up with his time. For years, that was the fastest time in the game. Then, that was got a 6 frame-perfect hits in phase 3 led to the third time. Still, Turk's time from 7 years prior was 4 seconds. In July 2014, Sinister One decided he was going to try to nearly all of his records were fallen by that point. His 213 was still standing. Sinister had 2 viable paths to beating it. The first was the long shot, where he would get the second knockdown by 133, which didn't require too much luck, then hit all 8 frame-perfect hits in phase 3. Hitting all 8 frame-perfect hooks in phase 3 could save 5 or more seconds over Turk's phase 3, meaning his phase 3 pattern essentially didn't matter. Hitting all 8 frame-perfect hits guaranteed he'd beat Turk, and could potentially beat him by several seconds. But of course, hitting all 8 was ridiculously hard, and had only been done a handful of times in the game's history over several years. So, he had another plan. The second method was what Sinister was aiming for. Getting a first knockdown closer to 130, then getting a better pattern from Tyson in phase 3 and hitting 6 or 7 frame perfects like Turk did. He essentially just had to match Turk's execution, then get better luck at the end of the fight, and would end up with a time like 211 or 212. Sinister's personal best was a 219. Over the course of a few months in 2014, he put in thousands of attempts to beat Turk and get a 212 on Tyson. Here's how it went.
Whoa, 218. I got a PB. Yay, PB! Wow, 216, dude. Holy shit. I just beat Zallard. Oh my god, dude. Oh my god, that was almost a 54. Yes! Yes, dude. Oh my god. PB. Alright, at least I got a PB. Holy crap, man. Yes! I tied Turk at least, baby. I tied him.
Sinister had tied Turk's legendary 213, but he wasn't satisfied. He didn't want to match Turk, he wanted to beat him. It was 212 or bust. On September 6, 2014, the Punch-Out community woke up to this. A 210, not a 212, achieved by Zallard, not Sinister. While all eyes were on Sinister, Zallard had quietly been doing attempts in the background. His personal best was a 216, 3 seconds behind Sinister, but on one magical attempt, he dropped it by 6 seconds after landing all 8 frame-perfect hits off of 132. It was the first time Zallard had ever hit all 8 in phase 3. The 213 was done. Zallard was the new Tyson champion. And Turk only had one untied record to his name. Soda Popinski 46.48. What was it about this fight that made it stand so long? Why did it outlast Dawn 2 with his absurd random stars? Why did it outlast Macho with the 1 in 500 pattern for the 48? Why did it outlast the 20 frame perfect punches on Mike Tyson? The answer was actually pretty simple. Nobody had any idea how Turk did it. Yeah, while Sinister and Zallard were spending months trying to beat each of Turk's 14 records, this one always just stood in the background. He was like a bad itch that just couldn't scratch. For all the other 13 records, they at least had a path to beat him. They knew what he did and they knew how they could improve. For Soda Popinski, they had no idea. Since there was no video to go with it, they actually thought it could be this time. Let's look at the fight itself. Beating Soda fast takes advantage of a bizarre glitch-like mechanic. When Soda throws an uppercut, if you press down to block or duck, Soda freezes in place. You're free to hit him in the gut when he does, and the star you get from that will automatically knock him down. So you just do that once in each phase to beat him very quickly. Soda is also very random. He always starts each phase with 2 hooks, but then he only has a 75% chance of doing the uppercut pattern you need to beat him quickly. He can also randomly delay the uppercut, with only a 25% chance of doing the uppercut. So you counter each of Soda's first hooks, then duck and hope Soda does the fastest uppercut, freezing the place to get the start, then cancel his next uppercut and use the start to get faster. And if you did that in each phase, your time would be 49 seconds. 3 seconds behind Turk. You couldn't cancel this hooks any faster. You couldn't force a faster pattern. A 46 was just too fast. And so, long after each of Turk's other 13 records were beaten, this one stood, and stood, and stood. And then, Nick Hazard came to the rescue. By early 2015, Zallard was very interested in finally taking Turk's last time down, so he asked McHazard for some help in figuring out how. McHazard pointed out that there were aspects of the tool assistance speedrun for Soda that could probably be utilized in a third-time run. Namely, getting the frozen punch for a start quicker. The old process was holding down, then waiting for his uppercut, then having him freeze and punch him in the gut. With McHazard's method, you could press down, then as soon as the shortest way and press the gut punch, then press down while the punch is going off the freezing in place. This works to get the start just the same, and it saves about 2 seconds, meaning phases could potentially be just 15 to 16 seconds long. And as it turns out, this is likely the method Turk used to get his time. The problem was, even with this strategy, beating Turk's time would be incredibly tough. You need both uppercuts and the shortest delay for each phase of the fight, which works out to odds of 1 in 151. The execution was tricky too, since the input of gut punching then tapping down was very precise. And what's more, Turk's time of 46.48 was very optimized for this strategy, meaning his execution was probably really tight. But at least Zallard had a strategy now. On January 24th, 2015, he did attempts on Soda, with low expectations given the hard execution and 1 in 151 odds. But on attempt number 8, he was able to get out of phase 1.
15! We got one.
Nuke.
Now we just need 2 more in a row. Oh shit. Okay. Alright, What? 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 Alright. Okay,
By some miracle, it had taken Zallard just 8 attempts to get 1 in 150 odds. But this time fell short of Turk by half a second. And as Zallard kept playing, he realized that Turk's 46.48 seemed to have better execution than he could get with the strategy he was doing. A high 46 seemed way more likely than a mid 46. So, he had reached a dead end. But just a few days later, someone found something huge. His name was Jack Wedge, and he had played the game alongside Turk more than a decade prior, at one point holding the Bald Bull world record. But he had come back all these years later to share a new strategy he had just discovered, the screwdriver. After canceling Soda's first two hooks, you could hold down the right dodge, then press B and then down to hit him in the gut right as Matt comes back to the center. This right dodge wasted the exact number of frames so that the gut punch hits Soda on the first frame possible to make the strategy work, guaranteeing the fastest phase possible. With this, Zallard knew he had a legitimate shot at beating Turk. He did more attempts to see what he could get, and on January 29th, 2015, he got this.
Oh my god, dude. Is that it? Is that it? Holy shit. Holy shit.
When Sinister 1 started to run this game in 2010, he had no idea what was in store for the future. Matt Turk's records were too good. To quote himself, they have little to no chance of winning times. Instead, over the next 5 years, this is what the will accomplish.
That's it. That's it. That's it. I just beat Transformers.
Oh my fucking god.
This is it. This is it. This is it. This is it.
World record. World fucking record.
It's fucking done. Yes! 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 Fuck yes! 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 Fuck yes! It's over, dude. That's it. That is it.
And with that, all 14 of Matt Turk's legendary times had been tied or beaten. It took half a decade, but thanks to the combined efforts of Adelcod, Jack Wedge, Nanophobe, McHazard, Sinister 1, and Zallard 1, this monumental task had been accomplished. In the years since, nearly every world record you've seen in this video has been broken. There's been huge advancements in strategy, and improvements in execution as well. So, let's jump forward in time, take a look at how today's records chalk up to Matt Turk's times. Thanks for watching. How do you speedrun one of the hardest games ever made? The original Castlevania has gotten that reputation over the years. Whether it be from its strong enemies and bosses or its strict gameplay mechanics, Castlevania isn't an easy game to take down. However, to speedrun it, or beat it as quickly as humanly possible, is on another level. For the past decade and a half, a group of gamers has been working to lower the world record for completing Castlevania. It's been a quest of discovering new strategies, grinding across multiple years, and working together. This is the story of their journey. This is the history of Castlevania world records. So, picture this. It's 2003, and you're Tom Vodka, a Nintendo speedrunner who would go on to set world records for something almost 2 years. One of your first projects, however, was going to be Castlevania. How would you pull it off? 6 of the toughest levels on the NES. It takes most people hours to beat this game. Well, that April, Tom Vodka took the whole game down in 14.5 minutes. The way to understand how Vodka is able to break the difficulty of this game is by analyzing it, level by level. The first level isn't normally too difficult, and he made quick work of it by upgrading his whip and tearing through the ghosts all over the level. Whipping them in the air rather than on the ground means Simon Belmont slows down less or not at all, saving a fraction of a second each time. Vodka did this as much as he could. He also picked up the axe sub-weapon before the boss fight, and used them to help him slowly but surely take the bat down. At the start of level 2, he simply jumped over most of the enemies before picking up the Holy Water sub-weapon in stage 6. Each level is broken up into 3 stages, meaning stage 6 was the last stage of level 2. He got beaten up a little bit by the statues, but used the Holy Water to take down the level 2 Medusa head boss easily. Level 3 is where Castlevania is known for making a pretty big jump in difficulty. There's hunchbacks that jump on top of you, skeletons that jump around, statues that fly around, and birds that fly around and try to catch you. And whenever you do this, you fly backwards, often towards the really legendary fall off. But luckily, Tom Vodka had a Holy Water. It's pretty well known how overpowered the Holy Water is, but Vodka was able to take it. Dropping the Holy Water frees them in place, makes them take damage, and temporarily prevents them from dealing damage to you. So often, instead of having to whip down the statues, Vodka just dropped Holy Water on top of them, stopping their shots and letting him walk through. That, combined with careful usage of his whip, allowed him to make it happen. Of course, there was no like this part, several birds and skeletons. Platforms, whipped the bats, and then moved upstairs to the first floor. These hunchbacks sometimes randomly drop axes and kills. Honda had a tricky jump over the stop. The boss fight, Frankenstein's hunchback, is stun locked over several holy water doors thanks to which allows 3 holy waters to be on the screen at the same time. Level 5 is infamous for its difficulty. The knights each take 9 hits to kill, and they throw axes that you have to whip, duck under, or jump over. On top of that, there's hunchbacks everywhere, Medusa heads that float around, more statues, and the Grim Reaper boss at the end. And all of them were no match for Vodka's Holy Water. Of course, there was still a ton of skill involved in what Vodova was doing. Many of the enemy's patterns were still sporadic, and had to be whipped or avoided appropriately. He had to be on his game at all times throughout level 5, and he made it through quite quickly. Level 6, the final level, featured Vodova temporarily abandoning the holy water to pick up the stopwatch, which froze all enemies when activated. This was used against the hunchbacks to stop them from jumping all over the place. Then, it was on to the final boss fight, which has two forms, Dracula and the beautifully named Cookie Monster. Dracula teleports after attempting to hit you, and each time he teleports it's referred to as a cycle. Every time Dracula reappeared, Vodova tried to hit him a couple times with his whip. It was pretty slow, and since it took 11 appearances by Dracula to kill him, or 10 teleports, it was an 11 cycle Dracula fight. Then, to fight the Cookie Monster, Vodova used the holy water that he had re-picked up from the leftmost candle. He stunned him in place and used his whip to hit the Cookie Monster's head, over and over until he was killed. This process took a while, but once he was dead, the final orb appeared, and Tom Vodova finished Castlevania in 14 minutes and 25 seconds. It was a nice run, with some pretty quick usage of holy water to go through otherwise tough enemies. Die a single time. However, there were notable slowdowns, especially when he stood still to whip enemies and had some slow boss fights. It was good, but could have been better. His run was the first of 4 runs that I consider to be in the early age of Castlevania speedrunning. The Sekiro speedrun to be completed 2.5 years later by a Retro 2D gamer. The biggest improvement about this run is the usage of boosting. In Castlevania, when you get hit by an enemy, you get knocked back quite a bit. This can be used strategically to reach certain areas faster. For example, in level 1, you're normally supposed to take the stairs down, go to the basement, and come up on the other side of the wall. But the 2D gamer simply did this. This trick saved about 7 seconds in the first level. And as Retro would show off, this could be used all over Castlevania.
Sekiro.
Boosting wasn't allowed under Twin Galaxies rules, which is where Tom Vodova submitted his run. But since Retro 2D Gamer submitted his elsewhere, he was free to do them. These boosts added together saved around 30 seconds overall. Other than that, he saved time from even more abuse of the holy water. Enemies that normally stood in his way were demolished with the holy water, including many of the boss fights. It was cleaner than Vodova's run. He didn't get hit as much, and he slowed down less overall. In the end, combined with the boosts, it was enough to beat him by over a minute, with a 13:08. Retro's run seemed to stand for much longer than Vodova's did. Close to 5 years, in fact. It's very